Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and despite being fired by MSNBC, Joy Reid has apparently learned nothing, and Piers Morgan rightfully calls her out for it. Let's dive in.
Let's just end with this. Not everyone was upset when you were fired. Plenty of those white conservative men that you like so much seem quite happy. Let's just take a look at this clip.
Joy Reid, probably the nastiest figure on MSNBC. The most left, the most vicious against conservatives and white people and men and all the rest. She has just been canned, fired, kicked to the side of the road. Her show is over. This saddens me a little bit because I did not yet have the opportunity to go on it. I am celebrating that there is no longer a market for her disgusting product. That's what I'm genuinely happy about. There has been a major shift. Her show and shows like her show no longer have value. And that's not just because of Joy Reid's favorite villains, you know, the evil white man or the Christians or the conservatives. It's because like no one watches her show.
So, Joy, I've actually got Michael Knowles waiting in the wings.
Great.
Is there anything you'd like to say to him?
No.
What did you make of his critique of your show?
Well, I mean, the reality is that obviously people watched the show, and obviously that's the reason that the show was on for 4.5, nearly 5 years. So if he didn't like the show, I guess, sorry you didn't enjoy it, but I really am not that interested in his views on it.
Okay, well, we've got Michael there. Michael, anything you want to say to Joy?
Yes, wonderful to be here, Joy. Very nice to meet you. And I guess I would agree with Joy's take. People watched the show in the past tense, and now there's no longer a market for that absolutely vile content. And I think that's good for the culture broadly. And now we can all chat on Pierce's show.
Joy?
The reality is, Michael, the content that you and Piers like to trade in is grievance. And the grievance that white Americans have, that they have to deal with.
I'm not American.
Diversity, that they have to deal
Joy,
with. You
this
just said
isn't
you
a
have a home in
grievance.
Los
I'm
Angeles,
British.
you love
I'm
America.
celebrating.
And by the way, white grievance is very good for your bottom lines. It's very good for your bank accounts. And so having me here to be able to continue to traffic in that is your shtick.
Well,
I
first
can't
of
speak
all,
for
I'm not
Piers
a
here,
white
Joy.
American. I think as my accent may reveal.
Well, I know that you're European.
And I'm a tan
I'm
American.
British.
Joy. My only grievances are tan
And secondly, I
grievances.
don't
But
think
I'm not a
anyone,
grievance.
Michael, I will let you respond, but I don't think any host in the history of cable news has waged more grievance than Joy Reid. So the idea that you're now hectoring us about feeling aggrieved about things, you spent years being aggrieved about absolutely everything.
Excuse me, but your favorite president, the president who you completely support, is nothing but
My
grievance.
favorite president was Abraham Lincoln.
His entire campaign was grievance. His entire campaign was grievance. Well, your former boss on the
I'm not
Apprentice, or
Donald
whatever
Trump.
You want to,
And you know what, Joy? In the end,
diversity,
and
that is the reason
and in the end,
that you all glom onto him
and in the end,
use him to further your own bank
actually, in the
accounts. And I
end,
get
most
it.
Americans,
That's what you're
as you
doing.
know, most Americans, having voted for him in 2016, and after Trump spent 4 years in the wilderness, and we watched the Democrats run the United States of America, people took a look at that in America, and then they voted for Trump second time round in bigger numbers, including a record number of Latinos, who last time I checked were not white.
The hubris of Joy Reid's refusal to look in the mirror and ask the fundamental question, did I do something wrong? The refusal to do that tells me something that I've already known for a long time, and I say this constantly. Democrats do nothing but deflect and deny. But there is a further left projection that Democrats also take in as well. And it's called the iron law of woke projection. Or rather, it's one of the subsidiaries of that law, so to speak. And it's the ideal that people on the left who subscribe to woke, who subscribe to Marxism, who believe everything in this world is about power and power imbalances, they fundamentally believe somehow, some way, that there's nothing but oppression and oppressed in this world, and therefore all they need to do is talk about the grievances, and then everyone will come together and we'll sort it out and we'll solve all the problems. And the best way to do it is to nag, shame, and whine until people finally give you what you want. Well, congratulations, Joy. That worked so well that your show only lasted a handful of years on MSNBC. The reality is, MSNBC's numbers have been in the tank, and a whole lot of leftist content creators, and I've seen this in my own studies, and I'm also a huge follower of the Timcast, and they harp on this point all the time, that if you look on some of their main streamers, and I'm not talking about mainstream, I'm talking about streamers, people who go on, usually YouTube or Twitch, and they'll just talk for hours. Which is something I can't quite do. I kissed a portion of the Blarney Stone, but I'm not that gifted. But what will happen is that these people have nothing to offer other than talking about Trump. There's a handful of leftists I actually do respect that do provide some quality content and some actual thought-provoking stuff. I fundamentally disagree with a lot of them, but I have more respect for them than I do Joy Reid here, because Joy Reid has made her entire career around whining, complaining, and moaning, and then when she gets called out for it, she immediately projects. She projects all of her own insecurities, all of her inequities, and all of the problems that she has constantly faced in her life because of her own hubris, because of the way she looks at the world, and because of the way she has been completely impotent to change anything to her liking. She projects all those problems on people like Michael Knowles and Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan is a moderate. He might actually be more of a leftist because across the pond, after World War II, in order to defeat those naughty brown shirts over in Germany and to later fight against the evil communists in Soviet Russia, they had to become very leftist governments themselves. And the American mind doesn't fully understand this. You have to visit Europe and talk to a whole bunch of Europeans, and then you have to make sure that you're not corrupted by that way of thinking. They have something over there that is a completely different animal, because European nations are in constant competition with each other. Here, over in the North American continent, there's only 13 countries. In Europe, there's close to 50. Okay, there's a ton of countries over there, and they're all competing against their own neighbors. And so that causes a rise in nationalism, and that's why leftists are so terrified of the potential of that nationalism to go out of control. I'm not terrified of that here in the United States, and Joy Reid probably doesn't have any idea what I'm talking about. But she has bought in to the whole ridiculousness that is this leftist power dynamic, that is this Marxist ideology that does not work when it's tested, and I'm not just talking about the economics. She would rather see the world through her own warped lenses and then complains when someone says, this doesn't make any sense, you're whining all the time, and I'm going to be honest, you sound a little racist. And she does. But I think the worst part about this whole thing is the smugness. That is the byproduct of this whole thing, and it ultimately reeks of what is ultimate privilege. And she is out there just laughing at, well, Michael Knowles, what do you know? You're a white American. What do you know? Piers Morgan, you're a white American. Piers Morgan's not an American. She has let her own hubris blind her so badly that she can't even get the nationality of Piers Morgan, the dude who's hosting her on this show here. It's just a sad thing to watch, but it's so sad it becomes comedic. So I find this rather funny. But it is ultimately the problem with Marxism, particularly when you apply it into a cultural sense, and then when you take it a step further, and then, well, it's not all about economics, it's about power imbalances. I know I sound like a broken record. I think that's the third time I've said power imbalances. Well, now that makes 4. But the reason I keep on bringing it up is because it's the only thing when you boil down her ideology, and it separates her from mainstream Democrats. So the reason that MSNBC kicked her to the curb is not only because this wasn't a winning message, it's not a historically Democrat message. Although the Democrats do give them a whole lot of, and when I say them, I'm talking about leftists and Marxists, And there's a difference between leftists and Marxists. I can work with the leftists. I cannot with the Marxist. But the whole problem with the Democrat Party is they deflect and they deny. The problem with the woke part of their party is that they don't just deflect and deny, they project and pout. They project and pout, and it's all because they think they're morally superior because they're bringing help to the helpless and hope to the hopeless. When the reality is, their entire ideology is helpless and hopeless. And if done correctly, hopefully toothless as well. That's why Joy Reid got kicked to the curb. That's why she lost her job. That's why no one has picked her up. And now she's sort of a pity party thrown for herself that can get some good ratings here and there. But it's ultimately to sort of set her up as a straw man, even though she has done that herself. She has set herself up in a position where she's now a laughingstock in the entire industry. And with that smugness, again, with that pride, with that hubris, ultimately with that projecting and pouting, she is now wound up as a laughingstock. And I can't think of someone more deserving in the entire industry. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good one.